He thought it was just an old man in a tattered army jacket. Just another relic with a cup of coffee, and no one left to defend him. So the biker laughed and slapped the cap off an 85-year-old veteran's head in the middle of a Mississippi diner. What he didn't know was that the man he humiliated wasn't just anyone. He was Colonel Walter Reeves. And 30 minutes later, military Humvees rolled into that gravel lot, led by Reeves' son, a decorated Army major. What happened next silenced a nation. You won't believe how it ends. Subscribe now, because some stories deserve to be remembered. The bell over the diner door gave its usual tired jingle as the lunch crowd trickled in, farmers in dust-stained jeans, truckers looking for pie and silence, a pair of nurses from the clinic down the road. And at the back corner booth, as always, sat Walter Reeves, 85, wiry as barbed wire, and still wearing the same Army field jacket he'd been issued in 1952. The edges were frayed. The patches had faded, but he wore it like a second skin. He stirred his coffee with slow, deliberate movements, one hand trembling just enough to make the spoon rattle against the ceramic. He didn't talk much, didn't need to. Folks who knew what he'd done didn't press, and the ones who didn't usually figured it out the longer they sat near him. Some men carried their history like luggage. Walter carried his like bone quiet, permanent, and shaped by fire. The air changed when the bikers walked in. Loud voices, heavy boots, black leather, and bravado. 5 of them, maybe 6, swaggering like the diner owed them something. One of them peeled off his gloves and tossed them onto the counter with a smirk. Tattoos laced his neck, and a sneer carved itself across his face when he saw Walter sitting alone. "Hey, old man," the biker called out, jerking a thumb toward Walter's jacket. "You get that off eBay? Or are you just too damn proud of losing wars?" The diner hushed. The cook paused mid-flip. The waitress by the window looked down and away. Walter didn't flinch. Just sipped his coffee, then reached slowly for his Capan old olive drab one with airborne wings stitched above the billand, placed it gently on his head. He stood, creaky and deliberate, and started walking toward the door. The biker moved fast. Too fast. With a laugh that didn't reach his eyes, he slapped the cap clean off Walter's head. It hit the floor like a gauntlet. No one breathed. Walter bent down slowly, picked up the cap, and dusted it off with the reverence of someone who still remembered the names of men buried under foreign soil. Then he looked up, calm, unshaken. "Son," he said, voice low but clear enough to make the entire diner lean in. "You just made a mistake you'll remember the rest of your life." The biker scoffed, laughed even. But 30 minutes later, no one would be laughing. For a full 5 seconds after the slap, the diner forgot how to breathe. Forks hovered inches above plates. A coffee pot steamed in a waitress's hand, untouched. A child at the counter dropped his crayon and stared wide-eyed at the man in the corner booth, the old man who hadn't said a word when the biker mocked him, but who now stood taller than anyone had ever seen him. Walter Reeves didn't move fast. He bent down, bones creaking under the weight of years and memory, and picked up his cap with hands that once held rifles and carried brothers. He didn't shake. He didn't stumble. He just brushed the dust off with quiet grace, like it mattered, like dignity could still be folded into the seams of something worn. He set the cap gently back on his head, looked the biker in the eye just once, then turned toward the door. The slap was still echoing, not loud now, but deeper, like it had settled into the walls, into the silence that came after. And nobody, not the waitress with the apron full of receipts, not the cook with a stained towel over his shoulder, not even the diner owner in his grease-slicked ball cap, said a word. Walter pushed open the door with one hand. The bell jingled, soft as wind chimes in a storm, and he stepped out into the Mississippi heat alone. Back by the dish station, behind a swinging door that never quite closed right, a young man named Danny stood frozen. 18. Quiet. The kind of kid who wiped tables before you asked and stayed late without complaining. His father had served in Desert Storm, came home with a limp and nightmares he never explained. Danny didn't know much about Walter Reeves, but he recognized the patch on that jacket, knew what those wings meant, knew what that silence meant, too. His hand moved without thinking. Phone up. Record on. He caught the last 25 seconds. The cap on the floor, the bend, the stare, the line. You just made a mistake. You'll remember the rest of your life. The bell, the exit. He didn't post it. Not yet. Just saved it, fingers trembling slightly. But less than an hour later, that video would be everywhere, and the country would learn what the people in that diner had just begun to understand. Walter Reeves didn't leave broken. He left waiting. It started like most things do now, with a notification, a ping, a buzz, a brief flicker across a cracked phone screen in a living room where a baby slept and a tired military wife scrolled between laundry loads. She didn't know the diner, didn't know the old man, but something in his posture, something in that stare stopped her cold. She hit share, sent it to her husband stationed at Fort Polk with a message. You need to see this. From there, the current caught. A retired sergeant in Ohio forwarded it to his old CO in Texas. A Marine gunnery sergeant in North Carolina reposted it to his platoon's private Facebook group with just one word: unacceptable. Someone tagged the official U.S. Army page. Another tagged a nonprofit for wounded warriors. The comments started to pile up. Who is this man? What unit is that patch? Someone get this guy's name. Then someone answered. A man who'd served in the 173rd Airborne years ago paused the video, zoomed in on the faded patch, and felt his stomach tighten. He knew that walk, that quiet dignity. That silver hair wasn't always silver. He dug through old photos and found one. Saigon, 1969. A group of soldiers, dust in their eyes and medals on their chests. Front and center, Colonel Walter Reeves, the same man in that diner, only younger. But the presence hadn't changed. Some men age, others solidify. He posted the photo side by side with the video. Same man, same eyes, same spine made of granite. Within 10 minutes, the whispers turned into lightning. Commenters didn't ask if it was real. They knew. Soldiers, veterans, Gold Star families. They shared it with reverence, not rage. Not yet. But something had shifted. And then came the second recognition. Quiet. Private. Sent in a direct message to the admin of a military support forum. That's my father. The message read, signed, Major James Reeves, U.S. Army. And just like that, the story wasn't just about a slap anymore. It wasn't just about a veteran disrespected in some no-name diner. It was about a legacy struck in broad daylight. A father wounded not by war, but by a stranger's hand, and a son who'd soon be called to answer. Because the biker hadn't just slapped a veteran. He'd slapped the man who raised an army. The Mississippi sun was already high and punishing when Major James Reeves gave the signal for the next round of field maneuvers. Dust kicked up from the dry earth as a squad moved through a coordinated breach drill, boots pounding in sync with shouted commands. James watched from behind dark sunglasses, clipboard in hand, every inch the officer his father had once been. Controlled, focused, unshakable. His phone buzzed once in his pocket. He ignored it. Buzzed again. Then again. Still, he kept his eyes forward until one of his junior officers jogged up from the Humvee, tablet in hand, face tight with something that wasn't urgency. It was weight. The kind that changed a day, or maybe a life. Sir, the young lieutenant said, holding out the screen. You need to see this. James took it with a calm hand. expecting a logistics report or maybe a family message. It took exactly 7 seconds to watch the slap, 5 more to realize who it was, and another 3 before the tablet was in his hands, and his world had narrowed to the shaky, phone-recorded footage of his father being humiliated by some nobody in a leather vest who didn't know the first thing about respect. James didn't speak, didn't blink. He just handed the tablet back, turned on his heel, and walked to the mobile command trailer. Inside, he made a single phone call, straight to the base commander. No explanations, just the facts. That was Colonel Walter Reeves, my father. A pause on the other end. What do you need, Major? By 11:47 a.m., the black Suburban was pulling out of Fort Polk's East Gate with 2 Humvees behind it. James was in the lead vehicle, still in uniform, ribbons clipped tight to his chest. He wasn't going to make a scene. He wasn't going to threaten or shout or punch a man in a diner. He was going to show that some lines, once crossed, come with consequences. Because this wasn't just about defending his father's honor. This was about reminding the world that some men may grow old, but they never grow small. The air inside the diner had changed. It wasn't just quiet, it was thick. Like the whole place was holding its breath. Plates had gone cold. Coffee sat untouched. The clatter of forks and conversation had been replaced by something else entirely. Waiting. The biker leaned back in his seat, grinning wide like a man who thought the world was still turning his way. He was retelling it now, loud enough for everyone to hear how the old guy with the army jacket got put in his place. His buddies laughed, though not as hard as before. Their glances were shorter now, more cautious. Near the pass-through window, the cook just kept wiping the same part of the counter. A waitress stood frozen, with a tray of refills she hadn't delivered. And Danny, the young busboy who had filmed the whole thing, paced behind the kitchen door, phone in his hand, heart in his throat. He hadn't told anyone what he posted, but he knew something was coming. Then, it did. First, the rumble low and distant, like a storm rolling in on gravel. Then the flash of headlights through the front windows. 1 car, 2, and then the unmistakable growl of military Humvees. Tires bit into the parking lot with the kind of finality that made people stand up without realizing it. The biker turned his head, still smirking, but it faltered just a hitch when the first door opened. Out stepped a tall figure in army dress. Not rushed, not loud, just deliberate. Polished shoes hit the ground in slow, echoing steps. His ribbons glinted in the overcast light. In one hand, he held a worn manila folder. In the other, nothing at all. No rank had to be announced. The room knew what it was seeing. The major didn't speak as he crossed the parking lot. He didn't look left or right. He walked through the diner doors like the building had been built around his arrival. And when he stepped inside, something intangible shifted. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a son, and he had come to collect what pride no one else had thought to defend. The door didn't slam. It didn't need to. The soft jingle of the bell over the frame sounded louder than a rifle crack in the silence that swallowed the room. Major James Reeves stepped through with a calm only those trained to endure chaos could carry. His posture straight, his eyes steady, his hands relaxed at his sides. He didn't scan the diner. He didn't need to. He walked directly to the table where the biker sat, all swagger and leather and unease now brewing behind the eyes. The man looked up, tried to smirk, but the expression died before it finished forming. "Can I help you, officer?" the biker asked. Voice clipped, chin raised like a shield. Major Reeves stopped, just short of the table. He didn't touch the folder. Didn't move a muscle that wasn't necessary. "You put your hands on Colonel Walter Reeves," he said, not loud, but clear enough for every booth and corner to catch it. "You didn't just slap a veteran. You assaulted a man who once jumped out of airplanes into live fire so this country could argue about its coffee in peace." The biker shifted. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Reeves cut in, still steady. "You looked at a quiet old man and thought that made him small." A waitress behind the counter pressed her hand to her mouth. The cook peeked out from the kitchen, apron dusted in flour. Nobody said a word. "You assaulted every man and woman who ever wore the uniform and came home to silence," the major continued. "You made that choice, and now you'll answer for it." The biker half laughed, a twitchy sound that didn't find oxygen. "What, you're gonna hit me back?" "No," Major Reeves said. He turned slightly. Two MPs entered from the front uniformed, composed, and very much expected. They stepped forward like clockwork. The biker stood, barked something halfway between an objection and a curse, but it didn't matter. One MP placed a hand on his shoulder. The other took the lead. "We're not here for revenge," the major said, eyes still locked on the man being walked out the door. "We're here for accountability." And that was it. No struggle. No raised voices. Just boots on tile, a stunned hush, and a man's ego unraveling under the weight of something real. Outside, the Humvees waited. Inside, the reckoning had already arrived. The cameras came before the dust had settled. A local news van screeched into the gravel lot, reporters already half out of the doors with microphones in hand, eyes wide and hungry. Another car followed, then two more. A drone buzzed somewhere overhead, trying to capture the image of uniformed MPs and an escorted biker now red-faced and hollow-eyed. But the man at the center of it all, Walter Reeves, was gone. Inside, the diner remained hushed, like a church after a storm. Customers lingered in booths, watching the door, unsure whether to speak or stay silent. No one had gone back to eating. Not yet. Not with that moment still hanging in the air. Major James Reeves stood near the register, hands clasped behind his back, not speaking to the cameras, not acknowledging the reporters now pressing against the glass. His focus remained where it had always been, on his father. He turned to the staff. "Where did he go?" he asked, voice soft now, stripped of rank and ceremony. The waitress glanced toward the busboy, who had edged back into the room, phone clutched tight in one hand. Danny stepped forward, eyes hesitant, but steady. I think he walked home," he said. 2 miles east, just past the old railroad tracks, little white house with a flagpole out front." The major gave a single nod. No words of thanks, no orders, just turned and walked. He passed the reporters without a glance, the questions flung at him like pebbles against armor. "Sir, was that your father? Can you comment on the assault? Will there be formal charges?" But he kept walking out of the diner, through the crowd, across the gravel lot and onto the road that curved just beyond the rise. He didn't drive. He didn't signal for a vehicle. He walked. Because some journeys didn't need horsepower. They needed humility. And as his boots hit the pavement, dust swirling with each step, Major Reeves understood something that couldn't be written into protocol. This wasn't about making a statement. This was about showing up. Quietly. The way his father always had. The road stretched long and mostly empty, framed by pine trees that whispered in the breeze like old friends trading stories too worn for words. Major Reeves walked without rushing, without checking his watch, his polished shoes coated now with the kind of Mississippi dust that clings to memory. The hum of traffic faded. The drone of news crews dulled behind him. With every step, he shed the weight of rank until only one thing remained: a son going to see his father. The house appeared just past the bend, tucked behind a slouching wooden fence and a front yard scattered with fallen leaves in time. The flagpole out front bore a weathered American flag, edges fraying but still proud. On the porch, seated in a creaking wooden chair that had probably been there longer than the roof, sat Walter Reeves. He held a coffee cup in both hands not because it was hot, but because it gave them something to do. His cap rested on the armrest beside him. His gaze was fixed, not on the road, but on the horizon, like he was still watching for something no one else could see. James climbed the steps slow, careful not to startle him, though he knew better. His father had probably heard him coming a half-mile away. "You didn't have to come," Walter said without looking. "I wasn't coming as a soldier," James replied, easing down onto the porch rail beside him. "I came as your son." They sat in the stillness for a long moment, the quiet deeper than silence. Then Walter sipped his coffee and nodded toward the distant hills. "You know," he said, voice soft, "when I came back from Korea, nobody met me at the airport. No signs, no speeches, just cold tile and a taxi meter running. Didn't need a parade. Just a seat where I didn't have to explain myself." James didn't speak. He let the moment breathe. "I come here," Walter continued, "because the porch doesn't ask questions. It just lets you sit." His son nodded, hands folded loosely in his lap. "I think the world forgets that sometimes people don't want noise. They want space and respect." Walter looked over then, just briefly. It wasn't about the slap. It was about being invisible. "I know," James said. And for the first time in years, they talked not about battles won, but wounds carried. Not about medals, but memory. And why sometimes it takes a storm to remind the world that dignity isn't optional, it's owed. The next morning, the bell above the diner door jingled with a different kind of weight, quiet, reverent, like the first note of a hymn. No one spoke loudly. No one asked for a booth by the window. People came in slow, deliberate, like stepping onto sacred ground. And for the first time in its long, greasy history, the old roadside diner felt more like a chapel than a place for pancakes. On the glass front door, a new sign had appeared. Hand-painted letters in bold black strokes. "This establishment stands with those who served. Disrespect will not be tolerated." Beneath it, framed and hung with care, was a photograph that hadn't been there yesterday. Walter Reeves, maybe 24, in his airborne uniform, paratrooper wings above the pocket, a rifle slung over his shoulder, his smile sharp as steel, confident in the way only young men at war ever truly are. It wasn't a portrait made for memory. It was a moment caught in full stride. And now, it hung like a silent sentinel. Customers came, not just for breakfast, but for meaning. One by one, they shook hands with the staff. They asked questions in hushed tones. Was that really him? Does he still come in? Is he okay? Danny, the busboy who had filmed it all, stood a little taller now. He wore a clean apron and answered gently, "He's okay. He just wanted his coffee." By noon, someone had started a GoFundMe page. Not for Walter. He hadn't asked for anything, but for something larger. A veterans center. Right there in their own county somewhere, people like Walter could go to be heard, not just thanked. The donations poured in faster than anyone expected. Some gave $5. Others gave $500. A few gave anonymously, though their messages were loud enough. For the men who came home and sat in silence, in honor of the quiet ones who never asked to be noticed. And through it all, the diner stayed steady. Coffee poured, eggs sizzled. But now, every seat carried a little more gravity, because that corner booth wasn't just a place someone had sat. It was where something had been remembered, something sacred, something overdue. The calendar didn't mark it as a holiday, but in that little Mississippi town, everyone knew the date. Every year, like clockwork, folks gathered at the roadside diner off Highway 19. No fanfare, no parade routes, just something quieter and deeper. They called it Reeves Day. The window sign went up the night before. Free coffee for veterans. Respect required. The place opened early, just as the sky began to warm with the soft light of late spring. Folding chairs appeared on the grass outside. A small speaker played soft country and old military hymns, and homemade signs leaned against car trunks. "Welcome home. Thank you. We remember." Inside, the same booth near the window remained empty until 10:57. Then the bell chimed, and Walter Reeves would walk in, same cap, same jacket, same quiet steps. People didn't crowd him. They just nodded. Some reached out a hand. Most didn't have to. They just looked, eyes soft, and went back to their coffee with a little more reverence than usual. At exactly 11:47 a.m., the moment the army had pulled into that gravel lot years before the music paused, a waitress dimmed the lights. A child rang a bell once, gently, and the entire room fell into silence. Forks were set down. Conversations ceased. Heads bowed not out of habit, but out of memory. It lasted only a minute, but in that minute, the room breathed as one. Walter never made a speech, never wanted a microphone. He sat, coffee in hand, looking out the window as if waiting for something only he could see. His son, Major James Reeves, now retired, a little grayer around the edges, would sometimes join him. Other years, he let his father have the booth alone, because some legacies speak loudest when left undisturbed. People brought their fathers, their kids, their stories. One year, a young soldier fresh off his first deployment stood outside the door for 20 minutes before finally walking in, hat in hand. He didn't order anything, just sat across from Walter for a moment and said, "Thank you, sir." That was enough. What that biker tried to take with a slap was never his to hold. But what the army gave back, boots on the ground, a folded manila folder, a son who walked a long road without hesitation, was a truth too many had forgotten. That dignity isn't something you demand. It's something you protect. And sometimes, the smallest booth in the quietest diner becomes the place where a nation remembers how.